Welcome, everyone, to another session of Career Talk with OG. Today's topic is first gen struggles, first gen victories. And we have my friend Victoria Banuelos, who is the author of First Gen, Next Gen, and she is also a marketing wizard. Victoria was also, well, we've been connected on LinkedIn now for a while, but she was also very gracious enough to be participate as a speaker panelist last November when we had the First Gen Virtual Summit. So, Virginia, I know we talked back then about having you as a guest. So, thank you very much for being my guest on Career Talk with OG.
No, thank you so much for the invitation. And you just said November. I feel like that panel happened yesterday. We were just talking about the past. What is happening? But glad to be back. Thank you, Oscar.
Yeah, no, of course. And obviously, Virginia, I know your story, and I have your book here, and it's autographed. Thank you very much. But for the sake of our viewers and our listeners, please share with us a little bit about your personal story and your career story.
Sure. Yeah. So I started off knowing that I wanted to go in marketing. I've pretty much done it for over a decade now at this point in my career. But about 7 or 8 years ago, I started volunteering with a lot of high school students and college students in the area, just sharing a little bit about the college experience. It was nothing too in depth, but as time went on, I started having more and more conversations with them, and I started noticing a lot of patterns in the questions that they were asking, especially what happens immediately after college and in the first 5 years of their career. Because I feel like a lot of students are like, okay, we know we've worked really hard, we've made it to college, what now? How do I even begin
Mhm.
to get my first job? So with that, I started just reaching out to people in my network, other marketing professionals that could share their experience, and then just really broach every industry at this point, to interview other business leaders, Latinx business leaders, what they had done. And as time went on, I started narrowing those questions to the first gen experience. And that
Mm.
eventually became the foundation for the book. So, really, the book is just a compilation of 7 to 8 years of interviews with all of these individuals, culminating in all these chapters here.
Yes.
Really encapsulate what the first gen experience is in the workplace.
That's awesome. And, we're going to get into, as you can see, I've got some little post-its here,
Love it.
some,
I love to see the
yeah,
posting.
yeah, some areas that we're going to talk about. I want you to elaborate. Tell us a little bit about your own personal first gen story.
Yeah, so I grew up in Montebello, California, which borders East LA and Monterey Park. It is also very close to Boyle Heights, which has one of the highest Latinx populations. I think it's like up to 96%, 97% last time I checked. So I grew up in a community that was very heavily Hispanic. I never felt like an outlier. And truthfully, my conversations around microaggressions, racism, anything on that front, it never really crossed my mind
Mhm,
until I
mhm.
started in college and I started to see, okay, yeah, maybe I'm in an environment where people don't look like me. But
Yes.
even then, college felt like a bubble because there was a lot of talk of inclusivity and diversity and equity. So it wasn't until I joined corporate America that that's when the first gen experience really started hitting me. And I really think that my upbringing and kind of that insulation helped me to just power through high school, power through college. But I feel like I hit a stop once I entered the workplace because it was like speaking a new language. It was
Yeah.
understanding a lot of the cultural nuances that come with office politics. And to this day, I feel like I'm still learning and I still haven't fully grasped, what that is supposed to look like.
Sure.
And I think that a lot of first gens have struggled with the same thing. It doesn't matter how strong of a candidate you are when you're in job interviews, if there's that feeling of imposter syndrome in the back of your head, like it's very clearly going to show. So I'm a strong proponent now. And before I was like, okay, what can we do to fit into this system? What can we do to get ahead in this
Mhm.
meritocracy? Now I'm at the point where like maybe this isn't so much a meritocracy as it is us needing to just change this already broken system.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that was a little bit of my experience. I think I was just woefully blind to a lot of the realities of being a first gen.
Right. Well, and you're right. Right when we grow up in the environment, the culture, right, and that's what we see. That's who we interact. We don't know that we're different, and then all of a sudden, you know, whether it's for some of us, it's college. For me, it was college. Just wow, this is different. What do you mean? Not everyone eats bean tacos. Okay, and or like in your case, you get out into quote unquote the real world, corporate world, and all of a sudden, right, these changes and these expectation expectations or ways that we feel we have to change to adapt in order to fit in. And also to your point too, I'm at a point in my life like, listen, I'm not here to fit in, I'm here to just be OG here. Okay, Oscar Garcia. I'm going to be a nice guy, and if you love me, great, and if you don't love me, I'm still going to love you. Like I've said, I'll love you from a distance though. Okay, but so let's talk about now your book. You kind of alluded a little bit about how the reason that of your book can, but take the reader through sort of the way you organize your book, the thoughts and so forth, and why you chose to do it the way you did.
Yeah, thank you for the question. When I first started writing the book, I didn't know what it was going to look like. I was like, I'm just going to put together all of these really great lessons into some sort of format that I can share with these students. But as I mentioned, I started noticing a lot of these patterns, and even in like looking at my own experience, a lot of the career blogs I had read, a lot of like how to negotiate your salary or how to like ace your job interview, it didn't apply to me. I don't speak that way. I don't express myself that way. And I
Yes.
feel like as a as a first gen, and not even just as a first gen, but as like a person that comes from the Latino community, we like to express ourselves. Like I wanted to
Yes.
just inject that into my career experience and what I brought to the workplace. And I think a lot of the business leaders that I spoke to were trying to do the same thing. And the way that the book is organized is I started looking at what are the things that really accelerated these business leaders' career. Like what were the elements that they employed that we wouldn't be able to read in a career blog, that wasn't necessarily a tip that was readily shared, online that you can just Google.
Yes.
And most importantly, like how could we take what we had learned growing up and inject that into these accelerants that would help continue to propel our career forward.
Yes.
So each chapter is a different accelerant that I've identified. It's by no means a catch-all, but one of the things that I noticed was, I'm going to pick one chapter, but this whole idea of becoming a leader in una nueva frontera, for example, that we
Yes.
go back to like changing the system there. Sometimes you're like, I feel like the odd one out. I'm not going to express my opinion. I don't want to rock the boat, but there may be 5 other people in the workplace that are thinking the exact same thing. So
Yes.
how do you find the courage to become a leader in esta nueva frontera and then, bringing that to the table? Um,
Love it.
Another concept was this idea of when we talk about code switching all of the time, but how code switching doesn't necessarily have to relate to language as it is to, how you fit into the culture. So how can you eliminate the need to even code switch and just encourage people to authentically show up as themselves?
Right.
Those are some
Yeah. I
concepts.
love it. Oh, this is and when you first started talking about your book and the way you organize it, you reminded me of what I discuss a lot in the type of training, the career and leadership training that I do. I refer to as being culturally relevant.
Mhm.
Culturally relevant, right? And the example that I use is I remember one day I went to a doctor's appointment to a nutritionist with my mother. I was translating for her, and the nutritionist pulls out, this was a long time ago, because the nutritionist pulled out a binder, okay, with pictures, okay, and the nutritionist is proceeds to tell my mother, because my mother was diabetic, you know instead of eating 4 slices of white bread, eat 1 slice of whole wheat bread, and et cetera and so forth. And I'm like, my mom doesn't even eat bread, she eats tortillas.
Yes.
Like, can you tell us, like, how many tortillas can she have? How about whole wheat?
Right.
How about red corn or whatever? Completely wasted time, that
Mhm.
appointment, because the dietary information was culturally irrelevant,
Mhm.
right? But let's talk about here. So, like I said, I did my homework, which, by the way, Angelica will be surprised. Okay, by that, some of you might think that I'm always doing my homework, but I did do my homework here. All right, and
And I love that story. Also, I'm thinking about it because I'm like, it's so true. When we think about diet and nutrition, it's always in terms of like, how much pasta can I eat today, or like, how many like slices of lettuce or pieces of lettuce. But it's like, no, how many cans of Sun Vista frijoles do I I cook? My comfort food.
yeah,
It can never go wrong. Iron levels are through the roof. Thank you.
yes,
The
yes, that's so
mantra.
true.
Just kidding.
Oh my god! Oh, hey, Raul, thanks for joining us, my friend. Hey, Raul Sajas, he's my buddy, man. Thank you for always for your support, my friend.
Salud,
I
Raúl.
appreciate it. Yeah. By the way, Raul, if you haven't connected with Victoria on LinkedIn, connect with her. Okay, she's awesome. All right. So, Victoria, first question here that I have from your book, and this is a question that it's a hot topic for many Latinos, and that is the word Latinx. In
Mm,
your book, you have it here. You say the Latinx elephant in the room, and I've heard you in our 10 minutes here that we started our conversation. You used the word Latinx, and you've also used the word Hispanic. Share with us your perspective, your feelings, your attitude towards the use of the word Latinx.
yeah. Ooh, okay. So here's my thinking, and I also feel like this has become such a hot button topic that it's derailed people from focusing on the bigger issues. Like I believe in the use of Latinx, and I will die on this hill because I feel like Spanish is a gendered language. It is, but we as first gens, I speak Spanish and I speak English and I speak Spanglish, so Latinx makes
Yeah.
sense for me.
Or trilingual.
We're trilingual. We really are. It's a whole other language. But no, I really struggled with using it, not using it when I was writing the book, and to the point where I mean I have it on the cover, and I was like, oh, this is gonna. I don't think
Yeah.
this will resonate well with a lot of people. But I'm like, I also feel like the people that will support the idea of the book and the what we talk about and the concepts and all of that, it won't matter. And I really do feel like it's just become this hot button issue where it really shouldn't be. And people are very, very passionate about it. And I
Yeah.
respect that. But I also feel like it's my book and I wrote it the way that made sense to me,
Yes.
the community that I'm interacting with every day, and that makes sense to them. And I
Yes.
still get flack for it, and I probably always will. But at this point, I'm like, well, it's printed.
Yes.
So
Yes, exactly. Well, and you know what? You said something that resonates too with me. You said it's my book. And listen, okay, folks out there, you don't like the word Latinx, write your own damn book, okay? Until then, read her book, okay? But no, here's the other thing too about the use of Latinx. I am of the thought that each generation um, defines our, what we want to be referred to, called, okay?
yeah.
Because when I was in college at UC Berkeley, my major was Chicano studies.
Hmm.
You don't really hear the word Chicano studies unless you're referring to Chich Marin and the OGs, back then.
So
Okay, the word Chicano, Chicana, you don't hear that anymore.
mhm.
And here's the other thing too. When I told my parents what my major was, for my dad especially, the word Chicano had a negative connotation
Mhm.
because as an immigrant, Mexican immigrant, for him the word Chicano was like, those pachucos, kind of cholo, you get into trouble, etc. That's what he grew up with in terms of that perception. And so again, I totally understand how, yes, we have some generations, some folks where it's like Latinx, but again, I believe each generation we come up with the that term, how we want to be defined. So I
Yeah,
love it.
completely. I love that I like the generational thing too, because it's true. Like we in the past, things have been one way, and now we're moving into a culture that's I think a lot more accepting, a lot more inclusive. Still got a long, long way to go before we
Yes.
get there, but language has to change too. And I think I'm being facetious and reductive here when we use Latinx. And there's so much to, when we're doing analysis of language and all of that that goes into it. And words are powerful. But in the end, I think that if we want to work towards this more inclusive idea of what our community is and who we are, we need to embrace new words.
Right. No, I agree with you.
Mm.
Okay, amiga, there's another section here that I have on your book that you talk about the gratitude roadblock. The
Mhm.
gratitude roadblock. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, that's a big one because I think it has a lot to do with our upbringing. There's a lot of dismantling of previous values that I'm sure a lot of us hold dear that needs to happen. But in sharing my experience with this gratitude roadblock, I think I was taught to humility was a big value in the community, and it's tied to this whole thing of like keeping your head down, working hard, be humble, and
Yeah.
good things will come. And
Yes.
so that's something that I always took pride in, that I was humble.
Yes.
Um, but in the end, again, once I started entering the workplace, if no one's going to be singing your praises if you don't sing them for yourself. And I think that there's a
Yes.
way to do it. There doesn't necessarily translate into arrogance or
Yes.
feeling like you're better than anyone, but also just feeling grateful for whatever crumbs come your way. That is not going to help accelerate your career. I
Yes.
think they're not mutually exclusive things. I think it's possible to be grateful for everything you have and be grateful for all the values that were instilled in us, and for the sacrifices our parents made for us, but at the same time realize that what situation we're in, if we've gone to college, if we're educated, that we had the opportunity to grow up in this country, what are we going to do with that, and
Yes.
use that gratitude to continue to move forward.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I agree with you. I agree with you because I grew up too, where my dad said, "Hey, don't brag. Let your work, let your actions speak louder." And yes, on the one hand, I agree with that, right? Like, humility is important, but it's also there's a time and a place.
Yep.
And if when we're applying for a job or on our LinkedIn profile, letting an employer know, a recruiter know, that's what or even applying for a scholarship or
Yes.
college, right? Like, we need to let people, that committee, know that, like, no need to read any more applications. I'm your person.
Mm-hmm.
Pick me, right? Like, that's not the time to be humble. You're
Yep.
going to be humble, you're going to be broke, okay? You're not going to get that scholarship, okay? So yeah, but it is challenging. And I've even done some posts on LinkedIn where I've been it's kind of been my own little sort of like testing, little petri dish here, testing stuff. And it's amazing how very few of us Latinos professionals feel comfortable talking about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep. It is super uncomfortable. And I think that there's also this fear of like being seen. I remember when I was writing book, I'm like, yeah, like I'm writing this and I'm excited about it. It's gonna be cool. Like, just feeling like I needed to downplay it because I
yeah,
was scared of like getting attention for it. And to this day, I feel like I haven't done the promotions that I should be doing. It's a very scary thing to have that platform. It opens you up to criticism. It opens you
yeah,
up to, if you said you were really good at this, why are you bragging about it if you're actually not that great? And I mean, that's where the imposter syndrome comes in, right? We're like, if you're
yeah.
bragging about this, then maybe like no one's going to see you. You can just continue working quietly in the corner. But yeah, closed mouths don't get fed.
That's true. That is true. Um, okay, another area in your book that I like, that I want to ask you about, is you say disappointing your first gen parents 101. You didn't become a doctor, lawyer, or engineer.
Yeah.
Talk
Yeah.
about that.
So I'm kind of lucky in the sense that my parents always gave me kind of free reign to explore. And they never dictated like you have to go into medicine, you have to be an engineer. But there was always that like I don't know if there's that guilt or that subconscious feeling of like, look at all of these sacrifices my parents made. If I
Yeah,
don't also make it, and if I don't do well with what they've given me, like this is their one shot. And on top of that, I'm an only child, so this really is their one shot. So there was a lot of there was a lot of pressure there, I think, to succeed. And I mean, that's just my story, and I feel lucky in that regard. But in speaking to other first gens and just peers and colleagues who have gone through this, like you just have this fear of disappointing your parents, and
yeah,
sometimes it's not even a fear, it's just like I can't mess up,
yeah.
it's not even a fear of failure. It's not fear of failure for me. It's failing my family. It's failing my community. It's like being the one person of color in this workplace. And if I don't do well, I all of a sudden become a spokesperson for everyone else. I think it's
Yeah.
like, drastic and doomsday scenario. But yeah, I mean, those feelings always cross our mind.
Yeah. Oh gosh, it's so true. Kind of similar to what you said about how your parents didn't push you in one particular, discipline, major, or type of work, but that you still felt that pressure. I mean, my parents also didn't push me in anything, to work in any particular field either. I think part of it was just because my parents were ignorant about just the education system and how to go about it. I mean, in Mexico, typically, this is how my parents grew up with understanding education, is that it's more like of a vocational. So
Mhm.
if you want to be an accountant, okay, you study accounting, and then you become an accountant. So it's very kind of structured, very, very vocational. Whereas here in the U.S., a 4-year degree, especially like liberal arts, you can go in so many different areas. And my parents didn't understand that, but they also gave me the freedom to be like, okay, well, we trust you, and if you think this is good for you, then we support you. So it
Mhm.
did give me that sense. But I agree with you. Subconsciously, though, we have that pressure that, like you said, they've made so many sacrifices, and we don't want to disappoint them. We
Mhm.
want to make them proud of us,
Yep,
right?
completely. And also trailblaze for the next generation too. Like I feel like I didn't have that many examples growing up of like a Latina marketing director. Like, what does that look
Yeah,
like? What does that career path look like for someone that wants to pursue that? So now I'm thinking of like all of the students that are, Latino, Latina, Hispanic, Latinx, just covering my bases here. Um, and like, and being that example for them. But, you bring up an interesting point, Oscar, too, how like in, Mexico, like it's a very straight shot into like what field or industry you want to go to. And here, because we have more options, it makes it easier for us to pursue our passions and do what we
yeah,
love, but also harder because it's like, okay, how do I blaze this trail for myself and for everyone that comes after me?
yes, yeah. You know what, Victoria? Let's talk a little more about right now about pursuing your passions, because that's another area that I feel many of us struggle.
Mhm.
And what advice would you have for a young professional or a college student or recent college grad in pursuing their passion?
Oh, loaded question. I think you really have to know yourself first before you can start pursuing it. And that may be a less popular opinion because I feel like for the most part we're always told like pursue what it is that you love, but half the time it's like I don't even know. I know I like this, but do I
You're
love
right.
it? And I see myself doing
Right.
it for the next 20 years of my life.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a process of self-exploration and really just pouring your heart and soul into figuring out what am I good at? How can I make money doing this? And what are the intersections of that?
Yeah.
And sometimes pursuing your passion looks like, taking a job that you may necessarily not like, but that's going to be a stepping stone to get you into the direction
Yes.
you're going. And sometimes it looks like just taking some time to choose a career and just choose a path for right now and realize that is not necessarily what you're going to be doing 10 years from now. It's
Yeah.
really hard to see, I think, just to really understand how long a career can be.
Yeah.
Time moves very quickly and life is short, but at the same time, careers are very long and it can take many, many twists and turns. And I,
Right.
I don't think I've met that many people who started off doing what it is that they were doing 20 years into their career.
No, no. Even for me, I mean, I I really do love. Been working for myself for almost 8 years, and I really do love the work that I do, the training that I do, the impact. But I also tell people too, like, I might wake up tomorrow and be like, screw this, I don't want to do this
Mhm.
anymore. I want to do something else. And I think giving ourselves that freedom to change our mind versus the pressure of having to identify what we want. Like, what
Mhm.
happened to just sometimes just getting in the car and going on a Sunday drive and just a ver dónde vas. Maybe you end up at the beach.
Yeah.
Maybe you end up in the mountains. I don't
Yeah.
know. Like, Yeah,
Yeah.
there's just so much pressure on that.
So much pressure. And we succumb to it too. And that goes back to like not having examples of people that have done it. Like we need more of us to be these business owners who have stepped away from the 9 to 5 corporate and just started pursuing whatever it is that they want to do. We need more people that chose the 9 to 5 corporate route but are saying, yeah, like I'm gonna come to work with pink hair and tattoos and it's fine because that has no bearing on how professional I am and what I
Yes.
what I can contribute. So yeah, I think it can take many forms and it's such a hard thing. And I just really think it takes time to really know what those passions are and acknowledging, like you said, that they can change at any given
Yes.
moment.
Yes. Definitely. Okay, amiga, there's another area, and this is, I
Mhm.
can relate to this too, here in your book, and it is, you have it here, the headline, Ya tú sabes, you already know, being perceived as an outlier in your own community is surprisingly relatable.
Mhm.
Talk
Yeah.
about, talk about this area, because I can relate to it. I want to
It
hear your
is.
thoughts, your experiences.
Well, okay, my experiences, like I mentioned, growing up was interesting because grow like in the area that I grew up, there were a lot of Latinos, but there were also a lot of it was a heavy Asian community that I grew up with as well, and all of us were first gen. So I think we shared a lot of common values. But I remember that I really liked math when I was in school, for example. And one of the stories that I wrote down was how people would tell me, like, oh my God, you must be Asian. You're so good at math. And this came from people in the Latinx community and people in the Asian community. And at the time, I was like, oh, ha ha, funny comments, just dismiss it.
Yeah,
But looking back, I'm like, if there is a very specific idea of what like a first gen is supposed to look like, what a Latino in the United States is supposed to look like speaking Spanish. These are the jobs that you can do. Here is, like here's the box that we put you into. And that even extends sometimes to our own community. So I have experienced situations where, I'd have these comments hurled at me. That sounds very aggressive, but at the same time, like if you feel like you don't belong in part of the US community, you don't feel like you're 100% Mexican. In my case, it contributes to that feeling of being ni de aquí ni de allá. So I really do feel like first gens, out of all of the generations and all of the communities, no one else has that experience, because when
no,
you're second gen, like you're more enmeshed into what American culture is supposed to be. As an immigrant, it's a
yeah.
completely different experience too. So
Yes. Yes. I've experienced it, and again, I mean, I'm at a point in my life where I'm like, you know what? I'm like,
just have to laugh it off.
yeah. I mean, whether here in the U.S. or in Mexico, I stand out. I remember, I remember one time. This is certainly before the pandemic. I did an in-person training for a group of social entrepreneurs. I think they were from Chile
Mm.
and in San Francisco, and it was in Spanish. And I kicked off my presentation, let them know, hey, you know what? Like, I speak Mexican Spanish. I said, I'm sure some of you are going to make fun of my Spanish. I said, but don't worry, because I'll make fun of your English. I said, so we'll be even here.
That's like you approach it, and then you say "mande," and they're like, "Oh, there it is."
Yeah. Like what when I was in Panama and Costa Rica, I kept seeing the word pipa. I want a pipa. I'm like, pipa. Like in my mind, I'm like, pipa means like pipe.
Pipe, yeah.
It's coconut. Pipa is coconut. Yeah, in
I've never
Panama and
heard
Costa Rica.
that. I mean, there's also Spanglish, like parquear. I didn't know
Yes.
that wasn't a word. It is to park. And no, that's Spanglish. Troca,
Yeah.
not a word. Vehicle, like
Yes.
so many.
Uh, although Victoria, going back, I think it was in Costa Rica where I did see a sign that said something in Spanish, parquear aquí. And I'm like, wow, okay, maybe in Costa Rica it
It's
is.
spreading. I know there's so many words like that. The other thing that happens to me too is I grew up in a Spanish speaking household. Like we speak pretty much only Spanish with my parents, even though they both speak English. But the minute I get into a professional situation, like if I have to give a presentation in Spanish, I have to watch a novela the day before because it's like my mind just gets erased. If I'm not
Yes,
speaking to my parents or my family, I forget how to speak Spanish. And I'm like,
yes,
where is that word? Why isn't it coming to me?
yes, yes,
So
yes,
yeah,
yes.
struggle is
No,
real.
It's true. It
I have
makes
to watch these
sense.
like YouTube videos from novelas in the 90s, and I'm like, okay, yeah, we're good. We've internalized it. We're back.
Oh gosh. Just go watch La Rosa de Guadalupe
La
right
Rosa
now.
de
Okay. Yeah.
classic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My partner
Dos
watches that.
Mujeres Un Camino is my go-to.
Oh my gosh. So what I got a couple questions, two more questions for you. My next question is today is women's day, International Women's Day. Who is a woman in your life that has influenced you tremendously and that you admire, and why?
Oh, this is such a cop out, but it's totally my mom, 100%. I really do think that I am who I am because my parents. I know it's such a cliche, but um, not gonna get emotional. But no, I mean, growing up, like part of that insulation that I mentioned previously that helped me just kind of get through a lot of tough times in my life, like came from my mom and both my parents. Just
Yeah.
like they just kept pushing through, and sometimes I think that now it's not the healthiest thing. I think that we have more conversations around mental health and conversations about self-care, and at the time those for my parents, like those were both extreme privileges. When you're in
Yes.
survival mode, there is no time for mental health and self-care. So I think I picked up a lot of those habits, but in the end, like they contributed to my drive, to my ambition, and there is no way I would be who I am without them. So
Yeah.
that's my mom.
No. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. And I'm glad actually you mentioned your mom. And I actually don't see it as a cop out because what I see a lot oftentimes is people will say, like I don't know, a famous actress or singer, so and a sports athlete. And I don't take anything away from those people because obviously they're highly accomplished.
Mhm.
But I'm a believer that in our own family tree, there are amazing people, in this case, your mother, that played a tremendous influence. And, sometimes the only time we recognize them is graduation,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah, for special milestones. Yeah,
yeah, so thank you for acknowledging your mother
yeah.
here. Very beautiful. Okay, última pregunta, last question. Um, I want you to picture yourself, your older self, maybe 20 years, maybe 40 years down the road.
Mhm.
Okay. It's kind of the reverse question of what would you tell your younger self? But in this case, I want you to picture yourself, 20, 40 years down the road.
Mhm.
And you're watching this recording because we're going to put it online. Okay. Once it's online,
Content
you're,
engine.
you're watching this recording again. What what would be going through your mind, to Victoria's mind, 20, 40 years from now, and what are some things that you would be saying to yourself then?
Oh my gosh, that is such a hard question, Oscar. Um, and going back to not liking talking about ourselves, torturing me. No, just kidding. Okay, so I do this exercise, and I try to do it like at least a couple of times a week, where I talk to both my like younger self and my older self, and I get advice from both. I know it sounds
Love
very
it. I
rude, but
love
I'm
it.
like,
This
okay,
is
my younger
awesome.
self is like, yeah, you go, and like my older self is like, what are you doing? Um, no, I want to look back, and I want to first of all acknowledge how far I've come. And I feel like this is just a blanket statement for everyone when if anyone chooses to do this exercise too. Acknowledge how far I've come, and also I hope that every decision I make is one that I can proudly stand beside, and I'm not just making it because of some outside influence, because it feels like that is what I'm supposed to be doing. And acknowledge that I've worked really, really hard throughout my life and gone through a lot just to continue to make decisions based off other people's needs. So I want to tell myself 20 years from now, like, I am so proud of you for continuing to follow this path, even though you didn't know where you were going, and that you have made the decisions that you did. Because I really
uh,
do think life is just a series of a collection of all the tiny decisions that you're making. And even when we're
yes.
talking to students, I say the same thing. They're like, I have no idea what I'm going to do with my career. Like, how can I do this for the rest of my life? I chose the wrong major. And I'm like, no, like, you've already made this decision. It's made. This is the moment that you can now choose to take the next baby step and the baby step. And the collection of that is what's going to make your career.
Yes, yes, yes. Great stuff, Victoria. Well, Victoria, I am certainly very proud of you for what you've accomplished. Thank you for welcoming me into your circle of friendship, and of course, for your book here and what you're doing to help others. Angelica did drop in the comments here, everyone, a link to Victoria's book, Get It. And Victoria, muchísimas gracias for being here on Career Talk with OG and just having just a nice casual conversation, sharing some thoughts, some wisdom to young professionals and just overall to everyone here. Muchísimas gracias.
No, a ti, Oscar. Muchas gracias. And appreciate your friendship. Appreciate your leadership. I love everything that you post on LinkedIn. And yes, everyone, I assume you're already following him, but if you're not, please. No, I'm gonna do sharing on my page too.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today again. Have a great rest of the week.
Bye.